Hello everyone, today I will be showing you how to make this lace crochet shrug with flare sleeves. The pattern is adjustable for all sizes and it's pretty beginner friendly, so let's get started. For this project I'm using Comfy Yarn by KnitPicks, which is a fingering weight yarn, and I'll be using a 3mm crochet hook. You can use any hook size and any yarn weight. To start off, we're going to be making one of the front panels, and you're going to start by making a slip knot. Then chain 6. And slip stitch into the first chain. And now you just made a little circle. For row 2, you're going to chain 4. And then you're going to insert a V-stitch into that circle. So you'll double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet. So you just made one V-stitch, and you're going to end the row with triple crochet. For row 3, you're going to chain 4 again, and then we're going to increase. So into the first stitch, you're going to insert a V by double crocheting, chain 2, and double crocheting. Then you're going to place another V into the chain 2 space below. So you're working a V right on top of the previous V stitch. And then you're going to increase on the left side by inserting a V into the last stitch. And then triple crochet. So now you can see we created a little triangle and we increased by 2 V-stitches. We're going to alternate between increasing by 1 and increasing by 2. So in this row, we're only going to increase by 1. Start by chaining 4 and then placing a V-stitch into the first stitch. Instead of placing a V-stitch on top of the previous V-stitch below, we're going to insert the V-stitch in between. So find the space in between the previous 2 V-stitches and insert a V in there. And then repeat it again by inserting a V-stitch in between the last 2 V-stitches. And now insert your last V into the last stitch. And triple crochet into the last stitch. So now as you can see in this row, we only increased by 1, so we have 3 V-stitches in the previous row, and now we have 4. Now we're going to increase by 2 V-stitches. So you're going to chain 4, place a V-stitch into the first stitch, then place a V-stitch into the chain 2 space below, and continue doing that until the end of the row. And then place a V-stitch into the last stitch. And triple crochet. So now we went from 4 V-stitches to 6 V-stitches. So you're going to continue alternating between increasing by 1 and 2. So now it's increasing by 1. Start by placing a V-stitch into the first stitch. And then placing the rest of the V's in between the V's below. And then place a V-stitch into the last stitch. And triple crochet. I'll be increasing by 2 V's this time, so I'm going to insert a V in the beginning, and then I'm going to insert it on top of the previous V stitches, and then insert a V at the end. I'm going to do one more increase row to reach my desired height for my shrug. This measures to about 8 inches. if you want your shrug to be shorter or longer, then either stop increasing before I do or continue increasing. For the following rows, we're not going to be increasing anymore, so we're going to just be working with regular rows. So you're going to chain 3 and then insert a V-stitch into the chain 2 space below. So you're going to be placing V-stitches on top of the V-stitches below. And continue this until the end of the row. Place a double crochet into the last stitch. And I'm going to continue with these regular rows until I reach my desired length. To figure out how many regular rows you should do, you want to take a measurement of yourself from shoulder to shoulder to see how long the back panel should be. And I would suggest to not do it strictly shoulder to shoulder because personally I like having my sweaters have a little bit of a drop shoulder so that it's a little bit easier on the armpits when wearing it. For me, I want the back panel to be 15 inches. So for each front panel, I want it to be half of that. So I'm going to be crocheting these regular rows until the whole panel measures to about 7.5 inches. It does not have to be super accurate, so don't worry. Once you're finished with the regular rows, you can cut off the yarn and make sure to leave a long tail for sewing. Then chain 1 and pull the yarn through. So just double checking here that I have about 7.5 inches, and that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to work on the same exact panel for the other side. Once you're done with both of your front panels, we'll move on to making the back panel. And the back panel will just be regular V-stitch rows. So you're going to start by making a slip knot. And then you're going to make a chain of however long you want your back panel to be. So like I said before, I want my back panel to be 15 inches. Just make sure you have a multiple of 4 stitches and then chain additional 3 stitches as turning chains. And this is just for an example. I did start my back panel off camera, so that's why my chains are not as long. But you do want it to be double the length of one of your front panels. So after chaining, you're going to skip 4 stitches and insert a V-stitch into the 5th stitch. And then you're going to skip 3 stitches and insert a V-stitch into the 4th stitch. And then continue this pattern of skipping 3 stitches and inserting a V until the end of the row. Once you have 2 stitches left, you're going to skip 1 stitch and then double crochet into the last stitch. So now we have our first row of the back panel. Again, this is just an example. Yours should be a lot longer. For the following rows, you're going to chain 3 and then place a V-stitch on top of the previous V-stitch and end with a double crochet in the last stitch. You're going to be working these regular rows until you reach 1 less inch than your front panel height. So my front panel height was 8 inches. So I'm going to be working these regular rows until I reach 7 inches. Alright, this is my actual back panel, and I worked a crap ton of rows. I don't really know how many rows, but I'm just going to measure it, and I can see that it's about 7 inches, which is perfect. So now I'm going to be moving on to the shoulder shaping. We want the shoulder shaping to match our front panel. So take a look at your front panel where you were doing just regular rows. That's where we're going to attach the back panel. So I'm going to be attaching that whole width, and I'm just going to make V-stitches until I reach that width. For my shrug, I ended up doing 6 V-stitches to reach the width. And just to make sure, I'll bring my front panel to match the regular rows, and it seems like it's gonna be a good fit. So after I have that, I'm going to chain 3 and I'm going to single crochet into the next V-stitch. And then I'm going to single crochet across the back panel until I reach the last 7 V-stitches. To match the other side, I'm about to be at my 7th V-stitch. So I'm going to single crochet into that. And then I'm going to chain 3. And then from now until the end of the row, I'm placing V-stitches. And then double crochet into the last stitch. Now you're done with the shoulder shaping. So it's just a very slight shoulder shaping, but it should definitely help the fit. And you're going to chain 1 and then cut off the yarn. Now the back panel is about 8 inches, so that's perfect. It matches the front panel height. And just to double check, I'm laying them out. So now we'll be connecting the two front panels and the back panel along the shoulders and then under the armpits. I'll be using a whip stitch to connect the two panels, which is the most simple stitch, but you can use any stitch that you would like. So I'm just matching up the two sides, and then I'm going through each stitch from the front panel and then from the back panel. And I'll continue doing this until the end of the shoulder shaping. For my last stitch, I like to go into it twice instead of just one time, just to secure it, because that's the part that's going to be pulled the most. And then I'm just tying a knot and weaving in the end. For sewing the area under the armpit, you can adjust it to your liking. I only sewed for about an inch. The more that you sew, the smaller the armhole will be for your sleeve. So if you want your sleeves to be a little bit tighter, you can go up more. I like to have it pretty loose around my shoulders and my armpits, especially for layering some clothes underneath. Now the front panels and the back panel is attached, and you should definitely try it on to see if you like the fit. I really liked it. It's a little bit away from the shoulders and it fits me nicely and not too tightly. Starting on the left side sleeve, I'm going to attach the yarn at the armpit. And we'll be working towards the front panel. So chain 3, and then you're going to skip the first V-stitch and then place the first V-stitch in the chain 2 space of the second V underneath. And then you're just going to keep going with placing V's on top of the previous V-stitches below. We're starting with working at the front panel because it's a little bit easier to understand versus the back panel where there's no direct V's below. Once you're at the back panel, you're going to see that there's no V stitches, it's just the rows, so either the chain 3 or the double crochet that's sideways. And you're going to be skipping a row and then working a V stitch into the second row. So as you can see here, I'm skipping either the chain 3 or the double crochet and then working a V-stitch into the next one. At the end of the round, place a V-stitch at the end. This is because we skipped the first V-stitch when starting the round, so we want to even it out. And then you're going to slip stitch into the third chain. And now you'll be working in the round. So you're going to chain 3 and then place a V-stitch on top of the previous V-stitch and slip stitch into the third chain at the end of the round. You're going to be working these regular rounds of the sleeve until the length of your sleeve reaches around your elbow when you wear it. I do strongly suggest to block your sleeves as you go to see where the actual length will be, because double crochets do tend to stretch a lot after blocking. I decided to try it on at this point and it was a little bit above my elbow, but then I decided to steam it just to relax the yarn a little bit, and now as you can see it's well below my elbow, which is where I want to stop. Just as a reference, my sleeve is about 12 to 13 inches before starting on the flare section. And if you don't want flare sleeves, you can just continue with the regular rows until you reach the full sleeve length. For the flare section, we're going to be alternating between an increase round and a regular round. For the increase round, you're just going to be working regular V-stitches until the end of the round. And then when you reach your last V, you're going to insert 2 V-stitches in there. And slip stitch into the third chain. So this was our increase row. Now we're going to be making a regular row where you place a V-stitch on top of the previous V-stitch. This is how the regular row should look like. And then I'm fast forwarding to my next increase row. So I'm just placing 2 V-stitches into the last V-stitch. And slip stitching into the third chain. Now fast forwarding to my next regular row, I'm just placing a V-stitch on top of the previous V-stitches. I only did 2 increase row for my flare section, but you're welcome to do more. I just don't like that much of a flare to keep the shrug pretty functional. So after I'm done with my increase sections, I'm just going to continue with making regular rows until I reach my desired length. I ended up making 7 rows after my increase row, and now I like the length, so I'm going to stop here and I'll move on to the border. For the border, we're going to be making shell stitches. So you're going to place 5 double crochets into the first chain 2 space. And then you're going to single crochet in between the V stitches and then place another single crochet into the next chain 2 space. Now you're going to place the second shell in between the V stitches, which is 5 double crochets into 1 stitch. And then you're going to single crochet into the next chain 2 space and place another single crochet in between the V stitches and place a shell into the chain 2 space. So you're going to be alternating between placing a shell into one of the V stitches and between V stitches. Once you're at the end of the round and you don't have space for any more shells, you're going to single crochet until you reach the first shell. And then you're going to slip stitch into the first double crochet of that shell stitch. That was a real tongue twister. Now you're done with your first sleeve, so you can cut off the yarn and pull the yarn through. Make sure to try it on to make sure everything looks good, and then you're going to move on to making your other sleeve, and you're going to be doing the same exact thing. For the tie string that we'll be using for the front of the shrug, I'm just making a simple chain. You can do an I-cord chain, which is what I usually do, but I just felt lazy. And you're going to chain until you have a good amount of length to tie a bow. And then you're going to find the first circles of those front panels and you're gonna pull the string through. And you're just going to tie a bow. Now you're done with your project. I really hope you enjoyed this shrug tutorial and follow me for more.